So to just jump off the start, the previous three animated series, Clone Wars, Rebels, and Resistance, began with like an endpoint in mind, an endpoint within the Star Wars timeline. So does the Bad Batch have an endpoint as well?
We have an idea of where we would like to go with these characters and where we want to go with the show. But as is with every series, sometimes that shifts and changes as you are diving into these episodes and getting to know them more and developing who they are. So we have an idea, and hopefully we'll get to be able to see that through all the way to the end.
And in the most recent episode, you had Cad Bane come in, which was especially awesome since it adapted like that unmade Boba Fett duel from Clone Wars. So, can you guys talk about why that was adapted, and will there be other scenes like that in the future?
I can speak to that particular episode. One thing we did and we're so excited to bring Cad Bane back. And once we knew we were doing that, we went back on the production side to designs that were created for the episode that you're referencing, but were never realized. So we had an opportunity to go back to those designs and then refine them a little bit. So there is a spiritual kind of feeling of what that was going to be, just from a look and feel for how his hat looks and how his outfit looks, but it's all been changed just a little bit. The episodic director that worked on that, Stuart Lee, he's so awesome. He's such a great director. And he worked on the Clone Wars with Dave Filoni for a long time. So when he was directing that episode, he wanted to shoot that scene himself. I'm like, all right, Stu, come on, buddy, let's do it. You got to do it. And he went in intentionally to vibe off of that footage that exists of Boba Fett versus Cad Bane. So it's not it's more of us as fans behind the scenes wanting to pay homage to that was never finished, more than anything else, really.
So spinning off of that, because the original version had Boba Fett in it and this was replaced with Hunter, is there a potential to actually have Boba Fett come in the future?
There's definitely, I would say, in the timeline, Boba Fett is alive during this time. I will say that. That's true.
That's fair. Fair answer. So actually spinning off of that as well, how do you decide which characters to bring in? Because you had, you obviously have all these other characters, like the other clones, but then you even had Jabba's Rancor. Give a little backstory for that. So what do you choose to pick from the timeline?
We always just want to make sure that whoever we're bringing into these stories is serving the Bad Batch's story. So, and when you're talking about the rise of the Empire, who is actually in a character sense thriving at that time and out in the galaxy, who the Batch could cross paths with, that actually makes sense. And from Bib being, Sid is a very shady character, and the list of her contacts, it sort of made sense that she would have some kind of underworld connection. And then, right now is the time bounty hunters are thriving, I imagine, in the galaxy. So it was an interesting opportunity to be able to bring in Fennec, who is new to the scene. And then when we bring in Cad Bane, just to see the difference in how the two of them operate. Because again, it made sense for that storyline with Omega and the Batch. And when we're talking about bounty hunters, to organically bring those two in.
You mentioned Fennec Shand. Now, there's obviously a huge gap in her story between Bad Batch and The Mandalorian. So will we see more of that backstory, like get an understanding of what she's been up to in those probably 20, 30 years?
I'll say, as a fan, I would love to see that. That would be amazing. That would be awesome. Because Fennec is a great character. We were so excited to have Ming-Na Wen come in to voice her in our show. And she's such a great collaborator. We were talking about how she had done her hair in The Mandalorian and how we could do a version of that for the animated model in The Bad Batch. So she was just great to work with and to explore her character in a younger time period than what we'd seen, and to see how sharp and clever she is, and that her lethality, there's no holding it back. She's just blasting ahead. It was really, really fun to explore. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I'll just say, yeah, as a fan, I would love to see that. That'd be great.
And then the core mystery right now seems to be Omega. Like the Kaminoans want her back, everyone's hunting her, but the core series is still on the Bad Batch. So will the Omega storyline continue? Is that something that will drive the whole story forward, or will you still focus on like the rise of the Empire and all that?
I think those are all active parts in the series, because it's, you know, we focus on these different characters. You get the Empire side of things from Crosshair, and the Kaminoan side from Nala Se and Lama Su, and kind of their different agendas. And then, you know, we're always sort of focused on the Batch, but who Omega is and what she is matters to the Kaminoans. But, you know, with the Batch, she is just a member of their team and part of their squad, and it's really about how they can train her, how she can, how this family kind of develops and grows. And it's not so much about that for them, but that being said, her backstory does come into play for, you know, for the season.
Then with you, in addition to talking about the rise of the Empire, most of the shows and most of the movies and like spin-off movies and all that focus on periods of time that are still fairly established. Whereas this, it's kind of like a dark period that no one really knows about in canon. So where do you guys want to explore yourselves, like particularly for both of you, to add to Star Wars canon?
Yeah, I mean, I'll I'll dive on that one. That's fun to dive on that one. Because the rise of the Empire is very interesting. What happened to the clones? What happens to the clones? Those are all very interesting things to us, to me as a big fan. And even just, we've talked a little bit about the design of the Empire and how it's not overnight suddenly stormtroopers and TIE fighters, but things take time. So getting into that and to see how things marinate and how things slowly evolve, to see how the clone regs that were brothers to the Bad Batch are now, you know, bleached white, devoid of color and personality for the most part, has been an interesting thing to see how their gear works. It's more Republic looking, but now it's colored in a way that feels more insidious and more Imperial. The musical cues that come into play that are in some cases intentionally half clone and half Imperial, how we play around with all of that stuff has been really, really fun from a creative standpoint. And I mean, I'll just say that it is a story that we do enjoy exploring, and we're going to continue to dig into that as we go forward.
I'd say, other than obviously the clone story, which I also enjoy, it's showing the building blocks of the Empire's takeover, and how, you know, now it's this transition period, and we're going to see planets that are more aligned with them, and who are happy that the war is over, but also showing it through the eyes of the Batch, and how suddenly, now that they're former Republic fighters, they have more in common now with defeated separatists than they do with the Empire, and just kind of how the allegiances have shifted, and how their eyes are open to more of people on both sides of that previous war.
And I think I only have time for one quick question. So going back to the Cad Bane scene, there was a moment where you kind of hinted that Hunter might have died. So is there potential, or you guys are open to actually killing off one of the members of that clone force?
You're gonna make me sad talking about that. I mean, the interesting thing with these characters is that they're familiar, and yet we haven't, as fans, really seen that much about them. So it creates an opportunity for us to take characters and explore them further. I think where they may go, since is to be determined in the as far as the perspective of the audience, is a powerful thing. You know, certainly you can tell a strong dramatic story even if you know what a character's endpoint is, but when you don't know what the character's endpoint is, it creates a lot of interesting opportunities for sure.
Mm-hmm.